Scary telling.
I always hated taking out the garbage at night. There was something about the darkness that made everything seem scarier. But tonight, I didn't have a choice. My mom had asked me to take out the garbage, and my little brother James had just made the soccer team, so there was no way I could get out of it. I gathered up the bags of garbage, recyclables, and compostables and made my way out the front door. The parking lot was empty, and the only light came from the street lamps. I walked across the lot, trying to keep my fear at bay. As I approached the dumpsters, I heard strange noises coming from inside. At first, I thought it might just be raccoons or some other small animal, but the sounds were too loud and too erratic. It sounded like something much bigger was inside. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should just dump the bags on the ground and run back inside. But I knew that wasn't an option. My mom would be furious if I left a mess, and James would never let me hear the end of it. So, I approached the dumpsters cautiously, holding the bags at arm's length. I tried to peer inside, but it was too dark to see anything. That's when I felt something brush against my leg. I froze, my heart racing, as I realized that something was inside the dumpster with me. I tried to back away, but I stumbled and fell, dropping the bags on the ground. As I sat there, shaking with fear, I heard the noise again. It was coming from inside the dumpster, and it sounded like something was moving around in there. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was a homeless person, or a wild animal, or something even worse. I started to back away slowly, but then I heard a low growl, and my blood ran cold. I knew I had to get out of there, fast. I scrambled to my feet and ran back towards my house as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was safely inside, my heart pounding in my chest. As I collapsed onto the couch, gasping for breath, I knew that I would never be able to take out the garbage at night again. The fear was just too strong. The memory of that night haunted me for days. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows, waiting to grab me. But I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that there was no real danger. A few days later, I found myself once again tasked with taking out the garbage. This time, I tried to be brave. I told myself that it was just garbage, that there was nothing to be afraid of. As I made my way across the parking lot, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look, and that's when I saw a man emerging from the dumpster. He was covered in filth and dressed in tattered clothes. His eyes were wild, and he looked like he hadn't seen the light of day in years. He stared at me for a moment, and I froze, unsure of what to do. Then, he lunged towards me, his hand outstretched. I tried to run, but he was too fast. He grabbed my ankle, pulling me towards him. I screamed and tried to fight him off, but he was surprisingly strong. He pulled me towards the dumpster, his grip tightening with each passing second. As we reached the edge of the dumpster, I realized that he wasn't trying to hurt me, he was just trying to communicate. He started to speak, his words jumbled and nonsensical. I tried to make sense of what he was saying, but it was impossible. He was talking about society's wasteful ways, blaming people like me for the mess in the world. It was clear that he was completely unhinged. I didn't know what to do. I was trapped in a dumpster with this man, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to get out. As I sat there, listening to his ramblings, I knew that I had to find a way to escape. But how? The man was too strong, and there was no one around to help me. For hours, I sat there with the man, trying to reason with him, trying to find a way out. But nothing worked. He was completely insane, and there was no telling what he would do next. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw my chance. The man's grip had loosened slightly, and I managed to slip my foot out of his grasp. I scrambled to my feet and ran towards the exit, not looking back. I didn't stop until I was safely inside my house, my heart racing and my body trembling with fear. The memory of that man, living in the dumpster, haunted me for years. It was a reminder that there was darkness in the world, and that it was all around us. The encounter with the man in the dumpster left me shaken to the core. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't focus on anything except the memory of his wild eyes and his ramblings about society's wasteful ways. It was like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. As days turned into weeks, I tried to put the experience behind me. I avoided the dumpsters whenever I could, and when I couldn't, I made sure to be extra cautious. But the memory of that man never really went away. It lingered in the back of my mind, like a dark cloud hanging over everything I did. Then, one night, I heard the noise again. It was coming from the dumpster outside my window, and it sounded like someone was rummaging through the garbage. My heart raced as I realized that the man was back. I tried to ignore the noise, but it was too loud. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't think. I knew I had to do something. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way outside. I approached the dumpster cautiously, trying to stay as quiet as possible. But as I got closer, I realized that something was different. The man wasn't alone. There were 2 other people with him, both dressed in rags and covered in filth. They were going through the garbage, looking for anything they could find. And they didn't seem to care that I was there. I tried to back away, but they saw me. They started to approach me, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. I tried to run, but one of them grabbed me from behind, pulling me towards them. For a moment, I thought I was done for. But then, something strange happened. The man in front of me started to speak, his words slowly forming into coherent sentences. He told me that his name was Jack, and that he had been living on the streets for years. He said that he had seen things that most people couldn't even imagine, and that he had come to the dumpster to find something to eat. As he spoke, I realized that he wasn't crazy, he was just desperate. He had been forced into a life of poverty and isolation, and he had nowhere else to turn. But even as I sympathized with him, I couldn't shake the feeling of terror that had taken hold of me. I didn't know what these people were capable of, and I didn't know if I would be able to escape. As I stood there, frozen with fear, Jack and the others started to circle me. They spoke in hushed tones, their eyes locked on mine. And then, something strange happened. Jack reached out and took my hand. He told me that he didn't want to hurt me, that he just wanted someone to talk to. And for a moment, I felt a strange sense of connection with him, like we were both just people, trying to survive in a world that didn't care. But as the night wore on, I realized that I couldn't stay with them forever. I needed to find a way out, to escape from the terror that had taken hold of me. I waited until Jack and the others were distracted, and then I made my move. I slipped away quietly, my heart racing with fear. But as I looked back at them, I realized that they weren't so different from me after all. They were just people, trying to make their way in a world that didn't always make sense. As I made my way back inside, I knew that the memory of that night would stay with me forever. But I also knew that it had taught me something important, that there was darkness in the world. The encounter with Jack and the others left me feeling conflicted. On the one hand, I sympathized with their struggles and understood the desperation that had driven them to live in the dumpster. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling of fear and uncertainty that had taken hold of me. In the days that followed, I tried to put the experience behind me. I told myself that it was just a one-time thing, that I didn't need to worry about it anymore. But the fear was always there, lurking in the back of my mind, waiting to pounce. Then, one night, I heard the noise again. It was coming from outside my window, and it sounded like someone was trying to break in. My heart raced as I realized that the dumpster dwellers were back. I tried to ignore the noise, but it was too loud. I knew I had to do something. I grabbed a heavy piece of metal from my room and made my way outside. As I approached the dumpster, I could see that there were more people there than before. It looked like a whole community of homeless people had taken up residence in the dumpster. For a moment, I considered running away. But then I remembered how terrified I had felt when I had run away from Jack and the others. I didn't want to feel that way again. So, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, brandishing the piece of metal like a weapon. The people in the dumpster stopped what they were doing and looked at me, their eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. And then, something strange happened. One of the people, a woman, stepped forward and held out her hand. "Please," she said. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We're just trying to survive." Her words touched something deep inside me. I realized that these people weren't my enemies, they were just people who were struggling to get by. And I knew that I had to help them. So, I put down the piece of metal and stepped forward, holding out my hand. The woman took it, and we shook hands. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. Together, we worked to sort through the garbage, picking out the things that were still useful and tossing away the rest. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was important. It was a way to help these people, to show them that I cared. As the night wore on, I realized that I had nothing to fear from these people. They were just like me, trying to make their way in a world that didn't always make sense. And as I made my way back inside, I knew that I had found a way to escape the fear that had taken hold of me. By helping others, I had found a way to help myself. The experience with the dumpster dwellers left me feeling changed. I no longer saw them as threats or obstacles, but rather as people who were struggling to get by. And I knew that I had a responsibility to help them. Over the next few weeks, I spent my evenings sorting through the garbage with the dumpster dwellers. We worked together, picking out the things that were still useful and tossing away the rest. It was hard work, but it was important work. And it gave me a sense of purpose that I had never felt before. As I worked alongside these people, I began to see them in a different light. I saw their struggles, their pain, their resilience. And I realized that they were just as human as I was. But as much as I enjoyed working with the dumpster dwellers, I knew that there was still work to be done. I knew that there were still people out there who saw them as nothing more than nuisances, people who didn't care about their struggles or their pain. So, I decided to take action. I started to organize a group of volunteers, people who were willing to work with me to help the homeless population in our area. We collected food, clothing, and other necessities, and we distributed them to people in need. At first, it was just a few of us. But as word spread, more and more people joined our cause. We became a community of people who cared about each other, who wanted to make a difference in the world. And as we worked, we began to see the impact that we were having. We saw people who were hungry and cold getting the food and shelter that they needed. We saw people who had given up hope finding new purpose and new meaning in their lives. It wasn't always easy. There were times when we faced resistance from people who didn't understand what we were trying to do. But we never gave up. We knew that what we were doing was important, that it was making a difference. As I look back on those days now, I realize that they were some of the most important days of my life. They were the days when I learned what it truly meant to be human, when I learned that we all had the power to make a difference in the world. And even now, years later, I still think back on those days with fondness and with pride. They were the days when I found my purpose, when I found my voice, when I found my place in the world. And I know that I will always be grateful for them.